Hello, sixth graders. Today I'm going to be going over your answers for Chapter 6, The Land Changes Hands, the packet you had to do with that chapter. As I'm going through the answers, if you need more time to write them down, just pause the video and write down the answer. So the first question was, how is the balance of power between the U.S. government and American Indian nations unequal? So if we go over here for the answers, so it was unequal because the United States had more power. They had more power because of three things. One, country had more money. They had more people, so a larger population, and had more military power. That was the biggest thing that the U.S. government had that the Native Americans did not have, was that strength. The Native Americans had nothing that could compete against the army that the United States government have. So that is one thing that definitely made it unequal when it came to these negotiations. So again, I'm going to go on to the next one. I'm going through them pretty quick, so just pause the video if you need to. Question number 2 said, give 3 details about the 1805 treaty. And that treaty that was signed in 1805 was signed on land that Zebulon Pike was able to get from the Native Americans. So you only need 3 of these. So as you can see here, the treaty was over the land where the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers come together, which the Native Americans call Pedote. Pike gave gifts of clothing and tools to the Dakota leaders that were there for that meeting, and only 2 of the 7 Dakota leaders signed the treaty. The other 5 didn't agree to it. The 2 sides did not agree on a price for the land. They just couldn't come to an agreement on how much would be a good price for it. But later on, the United States Senate ratified. That term ratified is one of your vocab words. Ratify means to agree to something, to approve of something. And when the U.S. Senate approved it in 1808, they decided we will pay the Dakota $2,000 for the land. So those are just some details of the treaty signed in 1805. Question number 3 is, why did the U.S. government build Fort Snelling? And here's the answer to that. They built Fort Snelling for several reasons. First was to enforce United States laws there. Even though technically Minnesota wasn't even officially a state or a territory at that time, the United States still wanted a presence there, especially with Great Britain being up in Canada to the north. They wanted a way to protect the American fur trade from the British. The British wouldn't come down from Canada and do anything to disrupt what was going on in that part of the world. And they also knew that keeping peace between the Dakota and Ojibwe was very important. So they hoped by having that fort there that it would help keep that peace. This question number 4 talks about different perspectives. You had to say, how did the Dakota value resources like land and river, and how did the European Americans view these resources? So they viewed them 2 totally different ways. So we'll start with the Dakota side. So the Dakota viewed land as something that belonged to everybody, something that was shared, not something that could be bought and sold. And it was only there as a means of survival, providing you the food, the clothing, the shelter that you needed, and to respect land. And that was completely different than how a lot of these European settlers were viewing the land as they came over, where the European Americans viewed land as something that could be bought and sold. And it was something you could use to make a profit, whether it was the lumber industry, using the trees to make wood and all that, or the fur trade, even was something they could make a profit of. So they viewed it as a way to make money, something to be bought and sold. Okay, number 5 here, it says Territorial Governor Alexander Ramsey wanted land for settlement. What did the U.S. government plan to offer the Dakota in exchange for land? So as the United States is getting bigger and more settlers are coming to what would eventually become Minnesota, they needed more land. So Alexander Ramsey said, all right, you give us land, we will offer you these things. You give us land, we'll give you money right away. We'll give you cash payment, we'll pay you. And then we'll give you annuity payments for 50 years. So annuity is referring to something that happens annually, so every year. So they said every year, after this time, we'll give you money for 50 years. And we'll also give you reservations to live on. So land, you can at least keep some of your land. So those are the things that Ramsey offered them in one of the treaty meetings. Okay, so this one we go to question number 6. It says circle the group most likely to have made each statement below about the 1851 treaty. So we should sign the treaty because the government is powerful and might take our land anyway. So a treaty would at least provide some land that would remain ours. That is something that Dakota probably would have said. So this first part you should have said Dakota, because they knew they would lose their land. They were hoping at least by signing these treaties, they'd get to keep some of it. Then this next one, excuse me. We should sign the treaty because settlers cannot legally move on to land controlled by American Indians, so that land must be acquired through treaties. That is something the European American officials believed. They said, we can't just go in and take the land, even though they very well could have because of the military they had. They said, no, we don't want to do that. We shouldn't do that. So so that's the answers for question number 6 that I just put. The first part would have been said by the Dakota. Second part would have been said by European officials. So then going down to the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux. So the Dakota and the U.S. government would have a large meeting to work out the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux. And it started on July 18th, 1851, and it ended on July 23rd, 1851. So it lasted 6 days. And you had to summarize what happened on the first and last day of those meetings. So I have that here. Oh, wrong one. Right here. So on the first day, what happened? Alexander Ramley proposes the Dakota accept money and goods for the land. So he made an offer on that very first day. While the Dakota, on the other hand, some of their leaders hadn't arrived yet. So they didn't want to meet and make any decision till all of their people arrived. So that's why it says here the Dakota are waiting for some of their leaders to arrive, so they choose not to speak. So nothing really happened that first day. So then they'd meet and they'd talk for a while. And then on the 6th day, the Dakota leaders agreed to sign the treaty. They signed 2 copies of the treaty and a third document. Most of them thought that third document they signed was just another copy of the treaty. They didn't realize that they were agreeing to use any of the money they got from the land. They'd have to give that money to the fur traders that they were in debt to. So they got tricked because remember, they couldn't read English. So they were just told, yep, here it is, third copy of the treaty. Well, they didn't understand that it meant they'd be giving money to the fur traders. So quick reminder, if I'm going too fast, just pause the video and write down the answer. Question number 8 has to do with the Treaty of Mendota. Some Dakota feared they would be cheated by the treaties of Traverse des Sioux and Mendota. So they were scared that they might be cheated. Did their fears become a reality? And the answer to that one is, did their fears become reality? Yes, they did. The U.S. Senate, so in the United States government, there's a House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. The Senate is responsible for treaties, making treaties, approving treaties. So the U.S. Senate changed the permanent reservations to temporary. So they said, yeah, you can have that land. It was going to be yours forever, permanent, but now we might need to move you around, so we're just going to make them temporary. And much of the first cash payment that was supposed to go to the Dakota went to the fur traders, because remember they signed that document that said that, even though they weren't aware of it. So now they lost money because of that. So they are right to fear. So what did the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in 1999 in Minnesota versus Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa mean for the Ojibwe? Remember, the Chippewa and Ojibwe are the same thing. The Supreme Court from last year, it was during distance learning, so if you don't remember, it's not a big deal. The Supreme Court's the high court of the land. They make final decisions on what can be done within the law or not. So there was some disagreements about these treaties and what can Minnesota do and not do with these treaties. So the Supreme Court said, after all these things, that the Ojibwe can continue to hunt and fish in traditional ways on land they ceded in the 1837 treaty. So when you cede land, it means you're giving it away. So the Supreme Court said, Minnesota, you can't tell them how to fish or how to hunt. They have rights. That was guaranteed to them under the treaties, so you can't take those rights away. And the second part, they said the state of Minnesota does not have the right to restrict the terms of the treaties made between the Ojibwe and the U.S. government. So the Minnesota just can't come in and say, hey, you can't do these anymore. We're going to say the treaty doesn't count. So that's what the Supreme Court said. You have to follow the treaties. So this one said, number 10, list 3 ways life in Minnesota was different in 1853 as a result of the treaties of Traverse des Sioux and Mendota. So these are the 3 big ones that I want to make sure you know. The Dakota were now living on reservations. They had given up a large pieces of their land. More settlers, those European Americans, were living in Minnesota, and more were on the way because there was now land for them to live on. And the Dakota were now more dependent on the annuity payment from the U.S. government. So instead of living like they had for hundreds of years and surviving on the land, well, they don't have the land there to provide them anymore because they have very small areas to live. So they can't depend on the land as much. So now they have to depend on the government for more because of that. And they're starting to give up their way of life and starting to live more like the European Americans, the white people that are coming in. And that was that idea of assimilation where they expected them to start living like a different group. Okay, so then we go on here. This one, hopefully you were able to give each map key here, each time frame a color. So you'd have 5 different colors. And then you'd have to look at the years that the land was ceded to the government and match it in. So like if you did blue in 1800 to 1879, well, here's one, 1805. So I'd color that in blue. And then you had to answer some questions. These ones, I just hope you put something down. And then number 3, it says how much of Minnesota's land was once owned by the Dakota Ojibwe. Your correct answer should have been all of it. At one point, all of that land belonged to somebody. So now we go here, these questions here. The United States government built Fort Snelling to protect the local fur trade from the British. That is true. So number 2, the Dakota went to the U.S. government and proposed the sale of their land. That is false. That did not happen. The Dakota did not want to give up their land. Excuse me. Number 3, a treaty is a written agreement between 2 or more sovereign nations. That word sovereign means they can make decisions for themselves. So the Dakota and Ojibwe were sovereign nations. Number 3 is true. Number 4, the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux had to be ratified by the U.S. Senate. That is true. All treaties have to be approved by the Senate. 5, no treaties made during the 1800s apply today, so the U.S. government can ignore them. That is false. Treaties still are followed today. Number 6, why did the U.S. government want land from American Indians? That is B. So there would be more land available for settlers as a result of westward expansion. Number 7, in 1851, the U.S. government offered cash annuities. In 1851, the U.S. government offered cash annuities for 50 years and a reservation for the Dakota in exchange for A, 24 million acres of their land in Minnesota. So that's a lot of land. Number 8, some Dakota supported signing the treaties of Traverse des Sioux and Mendota because D, all of those. It would provide them money to buy blankets, tools, and food to survive for the next 50 years. It would give them a piece of land where they thought they could continue their traditional way so they could keep some of their land. And they thought the government might take their land anyway, so try to keep some of it. So here are those questions. I'm just going to slide this down here so you can see them all on one page. Maybe. I just have to be smarter than the computer. So there are all your answers for page 39 there. So true, false, true, true, false, A, B, D. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Have a good rest of your day. Take care. Bye.